When I was around 12 or 13, I got majorly into Dragon Ball Z, and the series stuck with me, becoming one of my favourite franchises of all time. So you can imagine back when I was a kid, how excited I got to learn that a Legend of Zelda style Dragon Ball RPG was coming to the Game Boy Advance. Oh my sweet young naivety.
Let's start with the game's graphics. The footage you'll be seeing here is recorded using a genuine cartridge running on a Game Boy player attached to a PAL GameCube, but with a Japanese import of the required software disc because it was around £40 cheaper than the PAL disc. Also, I'm using composite, because PAL GameCubes apparently don't support S-Video. I currently have no way to connect RGB SCART to my Elgato HD, and these EON GameCube HDMI adapters are a little out of my price range. Suffice to say, the game looks better on the actual Game Boy Advance screen it was designed for. Now I'm done channeling Exo Paradigm Gamer, the overall presentation of this game looks pretty cheap regardless of how you've got it set up. There are some nice touches, such as a couple of short FMV clips that were a novelty back in the day, but I take major issues with the tile graphics. It looks like they were trying to emulate the painted backgrounds of the anime, yet the effort comes across as cheap, smeared, and lazy. That era's equivalent of what they did to the PC port of Final Fantasy VI. It's not sharp or refined, shapes lack definition, and it clashes with the actual character sprites. In hindsight, I can see how Goku and Friends' appearance here would form the basis for the graphics in later entries in this series, and I have to admit, they're not terrible. Animation is a little stiff, sure, but you can instantly recognise who everyone's meant to be. If you compare these sprites to SNES era and even other GBA RPGs, you can't really complain. In fact, I personally prefer tall RPG overworld sprites like those from Chrono Trigger to the more chibi sprites of older Final Fantasies, so this hits the sweet spot for me. Sadly, the face graphics then let the side down again. It looks like they took official Dragon Ball artwork and scrunched it down beyond recognition. Then there's the stuff that was clearly custom made for this game, which fares only slightly better, but usually doesn't even match the on-map character art of the person you're talking to. The budget aesthetic extends to the menus, comprised of basic blue boxes with little to no thought or effort given to them. It honestly feels like they couldn't be bothered. The graphics aren't the only area that feels rushed. Regardless of your opinion of Dragon Ball's plot, most people are going to feel let down by this severely abridged retelling. Playing through the events of the Saiyan and Frieza sagas, beating bad guys up as the one and only Son Goku sounds like an awesome premise. Until you remember one thing. Goku spent most of those arcs either dead, hospitalized, or on a spaceship. With that in mind, you'd think you'd get to play as Gohan, Krillin, Piccolo, or any of the other characters to experience events Goku simply wasn't around for. Maybe the developers could even take advantage of things the anime and manga glossed over, such as gathering the Dragon Balls to revive Goku before the battle with the Saiyans. Nope! This game is called The Legacy of Goku, and damn it, you're allowed to play as just Goku. The game out and out skips anything Goku didn't get to experience firsthand. Here, I've beaten Vegeta on Earth, and instead of covering the gang having their wounds treated, the discovery of Kami's ship, the tense game of cat and mouse between the Earthlings, Vegeta, and Frieza's men on Namek, or even Goku's own gravity training, the game literally jumps straight to Goku landing on Namek. I've not cut or spliced the video, this is how it actually appears in-game. This makes the game hilariously short and linear. I was able to reach the final boss in around 3 hours. It's safe to say the game assumes you're a fan and you already know the story because you're not going to get a decent recap from this title. There are even some legitimate mistakes mixed in for good measure. In the anime and manga, Goku learned the Kamehameha as a boy after watching Roshi perform the technique just once. But in this game, King Kai teaches Goku the Kamehameha. This is a problem for a number of reasons. 1. The move sucks in-game. It requires a charge, has very little range, doesn't do much damage, and in this example against Nappa, sometimes fails to do anything at all. 2. See that orange beam? Now I ask you, what colour is the Kamehameha, Goku's signature move?
The pen is blue. The pen is blue! The goddamn pen is blue!
3. In the anime and manga, King Kai teaches Goku the Spirit Bomb, a move that's instrumental to his battles with Vegeta and Frieza. Due to this change-up, you go through the whole game without ever learning this key move. The developers were aware of the game's brevity, so they decided to pad the runtime with copious amounts of escort missions. During the course of your playthrough, you'll have to find and guide a cat, a little girl who's on the same map as the aforementioned cat, 3 lost spirits, and multiple little boys. You'll also be finding lost pterodactyl eggs, retrieving toy boats, finding flowers, stopping bank robbers, and planting trees, among other menial tasks that are all taking place at crucial time-sensitive moments of the story, such as when Goku's son has just been abducted, or when Nappa's killing all of his friends, or when the Ginyu Force are killing everyone Nappa didn't already polish off. In other words, the precise times Goku's in a hurry and really can't afford to stop and do these things. The icing on the cake comes in the form of the Namekian Temple. This is effectively the game's only dungeon. You need to find 3 artifacts to escape, and the only way to get around is via teleports. Not only that, but the enemies in each area of the temple respawn every time you warp around. But that's not even the best bit. 2 of the artifacts you need aren't actually in the temple, they're outside. So a new player could easily spend hours searching every nook and cranny of this damn temple for artifacts that aren't even there. Let's take a moment to breathe. The plot, pacing, and accuracy to source material are garbage. That doesn't stop us enjoying the ability to kick ass and take names as Earth's strongest warrior if the gameplay's good. The gameplay is not good. As Goku, you can punch, fire one of 3 ki blasts, and sort of fly. The melee attacks are worthless because there's no knockback and your attacks don't interrupt your enemies. This means a fist fight boils down to 2 sprites standing on top of each other, mashing away at the attack button, but while enemies can take 8 strikes or more to kill, you'll die in 2 to 3. Punching therefore becomes redundant immediately, as hand-to-hand combat is simply a suicide mission. This is almost addressed by one of the key abilities, the Solar Flare. This freezes enemies in place for a short time so you can wail away at them without taking any hits in return. However, its short range and lack of indication it's about to wear off renders it too high risk to actually use. I already talked about the Kamehameha, so we'll move on to option number 3, the standard ki blast. This does very little damage, but has decent range and will kill your foes eventually. Your ki gauge, the equivalent of your MP bar, automatically refills. Very few enemies have ranged attacks to counter you with, so you can essentially keep a safe distance away and just pummel everyone with projectiles. Flight will help with this. Some enemies approach very quickly, and flight's often your only way of matching their speed or escaping. Because your other options suck and will get you killed, every battle becomes a case of fire ki blasts, fly away if need be, fire more ki blasts. It's as repetitive and boring as it sounds. Flying can also be a handy way to get around the map, but what you can and can't fly from and to is woefully inconsistent. Some cliffs you can absolutely scale, others you just can't. Some you can only fly up to from certain directions. It's weird and the rules are frankly unclear. Adding to the frustration, you start the game horribly underpowered. In fact, I died multiple times to the very first enemy I encountered. I'm not kidding, you'll see the game over screen constantly in this game. Let's break it down. After a brief intro scene at Kame House, you're taken to Goku's house. The natural route that's literally paved out for you takes you to an area littered with enemies that move faster than you and can kill you in, at most, 3 hits. The only healing items you'll have are 2 sensu beans from Master Roshi, and with this density of enemies, they're not going to last very long. There are 2 healing herbs you can pick up on this map, but you'll be dead long before you get to them. I actually had to spend a good while grinding levels by abusing a crab near Goku's house before I could carry on with this game. Seriously, I just stood across the water from it firing ki blasts knowing it couldn't do anything to retaliate. In fact, this is how I then dealt with a seemingly mandatory T-Rex mini-boss, which I later learned you can just walk straight past, and also how I went on to defeat the overwhelming majority of the game's bosses. It felt like I had no choice but to cheese it. In fairness, the game does give you a single line about a snake problem, and there are several serpents you can kill fairly easily around Goku's place to level up. But because they don't attack you and are very hard to see, by the time I realised this, it was simply too late, meaning the game did a bad job of conveying that information. Not to mention the severe balancing problem they're a band-aid solution to shouldn't have existed in the first place. What's frustrating is that only after you struggle through this opening area, you come across a village with infinitely respawning healing items. My recommendation to new players? Either abuse the crab and level grind, or take advantage of flight to dodge every enemy and get to this village for healing items as quickly as possible. The title is littered with these kinds of problems. At one point you get 5 bouquets of flowers for a little boy's sister, but he only ever accepts 1, meaning you're left with 4 in your inventory that seemingly do nothing and give you a nagging feeling you've missed something. Another side quest has you find and plant 3 trees on Namek, but the spots dug out for the trees can easily be mistaken for the craters and battle damage that's strewn everywhere. I already screamed about that bloody temple. In group fights such as Goku and Piccolo vs Raditz, your allies just stand around and watch rather than actually helping you. You can skip fighting the Ginyu Force entirely by flying to the top left corner of that map. In the fight against Frieza, you can't see anything thanks to these giant lava streams. The game honestly feels half-baked, like the publisher prioritized the release date and the developers had no choice but to knowingly ship an unfinished, unpolished product which sold to legions of Dragon Ball fans regardless, myself included, based on the license alone.
Sadly, this game was frankly terrible, and it still is now. The good news is that it did get a sequel, and it's actually the second game that I remember having a hell of a lot of fun with, and it's definitely something I intend to revisit in a future video, so stay tuned. Hey, thanks for watching. If YouTube's working correctly, you should be seeing a link to another one of my videos right about now that YouTube thinks you might enjoy. So, why not give it a click?